Off, Janie?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Well, for everyone joining us, good morning. My name is Janie Thompson, and I am the president of AFP Colorado chapter. For those of you who are unfamiliar with AFP, or Association of Fundraising Professionals, we are a membership organization, and we like to offer resources and opportunities similar to this one to help you become a better fundraising professional. If you are not a member, we encourage everyone to sign up. There's a lot of information on our website, afpcc.org. And I'm excited to have all of you today joining us for an exciting webinar on fundraising in the coronavirus era and how to navigate turbulent times. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I want to just introduce them each so you know who you're hearing from. First, we have Matt Wasserman. He's the principal and founder of MPW Strategies. We have Kaye Taavialma. She's the director of school fundraising at MPW Strategies. Hopefully I got the last name right. We have Patrick Gaines. He's the chief development officer at Boys and Girls Metro Denver. And then we also have John Pepperdine, who is a principal at MPW Strategies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. And thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Janie, and thank you to AFP for hosting this webinar. We're really excited. We've got a huge turnout. I think there was over 450 people registered, and I know people are still coming on to the webinar, so we'll reinforce some things. But I just want to kind of lay some rules, if you will, down on how we'll proceed here today. This is being recorded, and so as we mentioned earlier, if people have a recording, and we at MPW Strategies will also have a recording available, and at the end we'll show you how to sign up for that. But you can go to our site and to the contact us page, and ask for if you connect with us, we'll send you the recording. So first and foremost, we are going to communicate through the Q&A button. And that Q&A button might be at the bottom of your screen. You can click it, and that's how we want to communicate. We're not going to use the chat. Because there are so many of you on this webinar, we cannot resolve tech issues. So I apologize for that, but we just don't have that bandwidth. Again, it will be recorded. So if you're not able to get on, you can't hear, you're calling in through your phone, we'll be recorded, but we really just don't have the bandwidth to resolve tech issues. Speaking of which, we're all at home, of course, and so there might be some shakiness, there might be some bandwidth issues. If my kids are all playing video games and streaming movies, then things might get shaky. I told them not to, but who knows? There might be dogs barking in the background, kids yelling, spouses screaming. Who knows? So it's a new era. It's all up for grabs. So again, bear with us. I'm going to go back to the Q&A button. We're going to upvote. So as Kay and I talk to Patrick and ask him questions, you'll have the opportunity to go into the Q&A section and ask questions as well. And once we're done with our Q&A, our questions with Patrick, we'll open up to the audience probably around 12:30. And then you can also have the opportunity to upvote. So you'll see that thumbs up button. Click on that. If you see a question you're going to ask and it's already been asked, you can just click on that upvote and that'll rise the question at the top. Or if you see a certain question you really like and you want us to ask that question, again, just click that upvote button. We will not have time to get to all the questions. We do want you to participate. And not only questions, comments as well. You know, if you're doing something differently that's working that we didn't talk about, please put that comment in. We'll try to get to it and acknowledge that. We really appreciate that. We want audience participation. There are a lot of you on this on the webinar, and so we want to get as much to as many people as possible. And then just in viewing the gallery, there's two views you can do. There's gallery view and speaker view, and I think the speaker view makes us all Brady Bunch style. Gallery view puts us across the top or the bottom or the side, so you can see You can see all the screen and you can see the slides. We don't have many slides. So again, thanks for joining us. It's uncertain times. This is unpredictable times. We haven't seen anything like this before. We hope, everybody can come away with some ideas and strategies for dealing with what's going on. I don't think there's any solved way, any possible way to get through all this. But again, we're going to do our best to provide some direction and maybe some ideas on connecting with donors, working with donors, and just managing through this crisis we're experiencing right now. So with no further ado, we'll jump into questions with Patrick. All right. But before I start, so Patrick, before we jump into questions, can you tell us just how you managing through day to day right now? I mean, what are you doing? What's your self-care strategies and whatnot? I mean, with all that's going on.
Thanks, Matt, and good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining us. I reached out to Kay and Matt and John last week, and I said, guys, I could use some group therapy. And that conversation turned into the four of us, the AFP, and it sounds like about 400 of our friends. So honestly, none of us have ever been through this before. And I'm just grateful that so many of you signed on, and I hope that we can keep this cadence going in the coming weeks, because I think we're all in this for the long haul. The stay-at-home orders have forced us all into isolation. We all live in a very gregarious world, and I certainly do. And so to avoid that danger of isolation, I'm following a lot of the tips that are out there. I'm not a work-at-home guy, so I'm following a lot of the tips for how to work at home effectively. And then I'm just adopting an attitude of surrender, acceptance, and adaptation, rather than surrender, acceptance, and defeat. I find that, a global pandemic is something larger than I can control. So that's where the surrender and acceptance comes from. And when I sort of adopt that attitude of adapting my lifestyle, adapting my work style, adapting my own self-care, I'm better off. So thanks for asking that.
Sure thing. Thanks for that. That's good. Really appreciate that. It's a different world, and you got to adapt and be ready to adapt, and I guess be fluid.
Yeah.
All right. Kay, how about yourself? Can I throw it out to you as well?
Sure.
What strategy are you using?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's first of all, thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate what you just shared and how you articulated that. I think there's some real wisdom within that. I have a 14 and 16-year-old at home, in addition to having luckily been able to whisk my mother-in-law out of Houston just in time so she could be with us as well. And 2 dogs. And we are trying to intersperse everyday life with also elements of vacation. So we just threw out a 1,000-piece puzzle onto the kitchen table and have been finding our way to it throughout the course of the day. So I think it's a balance between saying, yeah, this is real life and we're adjusting, to also trying to find ways to stay engaged and plugged into each other and not necessarily plugged into our screens all the time, which I think has become a default. And so really intentionally crafting and creating spaces and places for us to be in community with each other as a family.
Great. Thanks for that, Kay. Yeah, I think that community as a family is so key. And yeah, a lot of screen time, a lot of Zoom time, but what can you do? All right. So we'll get started. And I just want to remind folks to use that Q&A button. And again, don't forget upvoting if you see questions or comments that you really like. John is going to curate all these after we do a little Q&A with Patrick. And
every single one of them.
Every single one. So keep going, keep putting them in.
And I really quickly. I do see that we have quite a few upvotes going, and don't forget to scroll through everybody and make sure you're looking at it, because that will help John
so much. Definitely.
So much.
Definitely. So Patrick, I want you to, can you tell us a little bit about Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Denver, and then kind of go into what steps you're taking during this crisis? What kind of planning are you doing?
Sure.
And that planning as it relates to internally and externally?
Sure. So as a chief development officer, it's probably a blinding flash of the obvious, but I am a frontline fundraiser, and I also have the privilege and honor of being a part of our leadership team to walk you through our experience. And I share this only because hopefully each of you can relate to it, not only in your personal lives, but professional. On March 2nd, that's a Monday, I have a Monday check-in meeting with my development team. I've got 11 full-time folks that I work with. And we were just conquering the world like we do at our usual development team meetings. And at the very end, after high-level strategy and tactics, literally a staff member just threw out as a last minute before we adjourned, "Hey, what's our plan around the coronavirus?" And we all sort of shrugged our shoulders and said, "Gee, I don't know." And as a member of the leadership team, I took it to my colleagues. By March 4th, now we're on a Wednesday, we had hung up some signs and placards about good hygiene and washing your hands, and we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. Hey, look at us, we're behaving. By March 11th, we were starting to hold 8 a.m. crisis response meetings with our leadership team and executive committee of our board, because it became apparent that big chunks of our country were shutting down, like the National Basketball Association and the NCAA and universities. Seemed like we should be paying attention. By March 12th, we had canceled all of our events. We have 10,000 club members across the Metro Denver area. We have 20 clubs. We operate about 250 staff, a budget this year of about 17 million. By March 12th, by March 13th, we had closed all our clubs. We had everyone working in remote locations. And by March 17th, we were in essential services only, and the world was changing hourly. So I imagine that that's a fairly similar trajectory for all of you, regardless of the size of the organization. So we divided ourselves up into, in those crisis response meetings, which are still happening every morning, 8 a.m. We broke it down into 3 basic chunks: our immediate operations as an organization, our fundraising approach, because clearly our income and expenses were going to change dynamically, and fundraising is such a big piece of that as a nonprofit organization, and then our communications. So operations, fundraising, and communications.
Great, thanks for that. So emergency meetings every morning, 8 a.m. That's who's involved? Is that leadership involved in that, or?
Right. So we've got a leadership team. I liken it to kind of if anybody has followed many years ago, the Apollo 13. They call it the most successful failure in space travel history, where in between the Earth and the Moon, the aircraft or the spacecraft basically lost all of its oxygen support, which powers the craft. And so they had to literally completely abandon a flight plan that they had taken years to develop and write a new flight plan while they were hurtling through space into the great unknown. That's sort of how I feel every morning when I go into that leadership team meeting. We are writing an entirely new plan while implementing it at the same time. And we broke it into 30, 60, and 90 days based on those operations, budget, and communications buckets.
Mm-hmm. That is quite an undertaking. Do you find, is that a distraction from the day-to-day? And, is this all consuming, I guess, doing that?
I think one of the most beneficial articles I read, there's 2. One was by the Harvard Business Review, and it said, it's something like that uncomfortable feeling that you have in your stomach right now is grief. Highly recommend that. If you just Google Harvard Business Review and grief, it's a terrific article on kind of how to manage this personally. From a business standpoint, right, it demands that all of us immediately suspend any sense of normalcy. So I think that when we face challenges on a day-to-day basis as nonprofit leaders and fundraisers, we're always up against challenges, but we always fall back on, well, what did we do before? And here we are, folks, we've never done this before, and in fact, nobody else has either. So that suspension of normalcy is the way we kind of keep ourselves from going crazy, because otherwise you look back and say, well, what did we do? And when there's nothing there, you feel almost inadequate. When you accept, hey, we're creating a new normal, it almost generates a sense of optimism and creativity to boldly try new things, because our hand is frankly being forced to do so.
I love that. You're creating this new normal. So instead of being stuck in fear of this is something new that I can't handle, that it's time to create a normal. All right. So let's shift to the next question.
Sure. So Patrick, I think one of obviously the big questions and reasons we're all here together is to really talk about the impact that this has on reaching out to our donors. And so how have you all shifted your approach related to your current donors, prospects, events, the hand raisers you have who are like, hey, how can I help? What can I do? How has Boys and Girls Club responded to this, and how have you led your team through this shift?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kay. And I hopefully this is useful advice for everybody. The first and foremost, we responded to our people. So the constituents, those 10,000 children and the families that rely on us, we wanted to make sure that they were in a stable place within our purview of sense of control. So that's working with our school partners and municipal governments to make sure the families were safe. The next most important people are our staff and our volunteers. So it was getting them in place, and then the community at large. I believe this as an individual, as a taxpayer, and as a professional. We are part of a public charitable organization. We have an obligation to behave as members of a community. So the Boys and Girls Clubs is working with emergency response teams at the state and municipal levels to see how can we provide both access to our capital assets and our human assets in response to community need. The most prominent one that you'll be hearing about soon is partnering with Food Bank of the Rockies to make our fleet of vehicles and our facilities available for food distribution to those that need it. As far as fundraising goes, there was an immediate shift from asking to stewarding. So rather than going out and putting our hands out and saying help, because in the early days of this, and we're still in the early days of this storm, we are assessing in real time, and the real need, folks, is weeks and months from now, and that's just the reality. Now, there are absolutely crucial needs within our 30, 60, 90-day plan. We are spending and absorbing and burning through resources that we did not budget. So yes, there are immediate needs, and I'll get to that in a minute, but shifting from asking to stewarding and offering solutions. So what do I mean by that? We reached out to many of our partners and said, look, we know we're all in this together. So large foundations that support us, government agencies that support us, and corporations and individuals, all those categories. And we sort of said, look, we're stable for the moment, doing the best we can. What are your plans in response to this from a community standpoint as you take care of your constituents and then look to the community? And what we're finding is that approach says, we're so glad you asked, can you come to the table with us, because we're trying to solve problems. And some already, just in a matter of a week's time, that is yielding financial conversations about, hey, we as a government, we as a company, we as a foundation are trying to address some acute needs in the community. Boys and Girls Club, are you in a position to help us achieve that? Yes to some, no to others, maybe to some additional ones. For instance, we're exploring whether or not we can get into a temporary daycare position to help with folks that have to be at work, like healthcare workers in defense. So to summarize that again, offering solutions and moving more toward a stewardship. How are you guys doing? How are you responding? And how can we work together?
Great. And I mean, all of it's really incredible. And I think I go into almost my leadership brain here also, and I'm curious about any mindset roadblocks that you found you ran into, and what shifts you had to make to help push people beyond and into kind of this new reality.
You know, one of the interesting ones, and I'll be very curious to find if others have experienced this out there in the milieu on this call. There was a rush toward us of how can we help, how can we help, how can we help? Well, I don't know what the right metaphor is, you guys. I don't know if it's, the house is burning down, look, just grab a hose. Well, the house wasn't necessarily burning down. It was everything around us. So what do you do when well-intentioned, what I say in air quotes, do-gooders, friends and family come and say, can I give you money? Can I give you food? Can I give you the clothes off my back? And you're saying, hang on, we're not exactly sure where the need is just yet, without making you sound ungrateful or frankly unprepared. So what we have done is said, look, this is my word, we've told the truth. We've said, we're not quite there yet. Can you stay with us? Meaning, yes, we could set up an immediate cash fund. I think I saw a question come through, a couple questions come through the chat room. Sorry, John, I'm just going to step on your toes a little here. How do you position yourself as an organization that serves a kind of a finite mission when knowing that there's people being laid off all over the community, potential homelessness, people that are hungry, and that's going to escalate? And so I say, we look again to our own constituents and say, are we taking care of them? And then how are we partnering with the community at large to address our constituents in a way that is simultaneously addressing community need? And so asking our friends who are the mindset K is, I want to help you and I want to help you now. Having the courage to be able to say, can you just give me 5 minutes or 5 days to assess what the real need is so that we can use your precious resources, and every resource counts. A $10 gift card to King Soopers or a $10,000 unrestricted operational gift. Either way, those are going to be highly valuable to us, but having the courage to say, can you just give us a minute? And that's hard. It's hard not to just grab the money or the gift, whatever it is, and say thanks. But I'm trying to look down the road and say, I want to make sure I can show you that we've made excellent use of that philanthropy.
That's great, Patrick. Thanks for that. And then I want to remind everybody and people that have joined that if you have questions or comments related to these questions and what Patrick said, or that you want us to cover later on, please put that in the Q&A. And then there's the upvoting feature. So if you see a question that you're going to ask or you really like, hit that thumbs up button and it'll rise to the top, and it'll help us kind of curate all these questions and comments. So keep them going as questions come up. So I'm gonna move to the next question, which is about communication.
Yeah.
And so have I'm a frontline fundraiser. I'm a major gift officer. It's all about meeting with the donor and that need and need visit, that face-to-face visit, or we're hosting tours through the clubs, things like that, or house parties. I mean, what's this new look like? How are you staying in touch with donors and prospects and stakeholders?
So we have a gala planned for May 2nd. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but we were moving full steam ahead toward that gala. And, we're one of those organizations, maybe some of you can relate to that, Boys and Girls Club. It is very large in its size and scale. But the people who write the biggest checks to support us don't consume what we provide, meaning they don't come and look at art on a wall or hear an opera or a symphony on a stage. They're not consuming our clubs. They're helping support the people that consume our programs in the clubs. So we really rely on galas and large gatherings like that. So when we knew we had to postpone that gala and potentially cancel it, we really are right now looking at postponing it for another date because we still need to convene those people together. We shifted immediately from, gosh, I hope you will still support our gala, to remember your commitment in the first place was to our mission and to our kids. And that's working very well. That's exactly how we're making the call. Obviously, we're having to postpone the date. Can we rely on you to keep your commitment to our kids? And the answer has been so far yes. So to communications, then we started instantly to divide up our communications into specific personas. So it's all the usual personas, our governance, our board of directors, our investors, meaning our major donors, our loyalty donors, meaning the large pool of annual fund donors, all the way to our volunteers, and being very intentional about how we communicate with each one of those. The first wave of communications, which really just finished up on Tuesday of this week, maybe Wednesday, was all reactive emergency response. Oh my gosh, we're getting calls, people are worried about us. We've got to, put out these fires. We're now finally moving into a more proactive communications planning. So rather than it being, just emergency response, yes, we got the kitchen fire out, but now we're moving to the dining room. Things are as stable as they could possibly be in an environment that is inherently unstable. And we are intentionally, proactively reaching out to those folks. So I'll go back to the message I said before. We're saying, yes, we're still stable today, but we know that the real waves of this storm are coming in terms of economy. We're not trying to go out our wheelhouse and address the health pandemic. We're addressing the economic impact, trying to address the economic impact that is coming, and saying to our persona audiences through our communication, help us get ready for the storm that's coming for the long haul, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And so we're asking them to allow us to come to the table to seek alignment between their broader response to this COVID crisis and our ability to address that response. And I think that we're uniquely positioned to do that in the nonprofit world. Those with the resources want to fix problems. We have the ability to be a conduit through which those problems can be fixed. And I do believe, I am the eternal optimist, guilty as charged, but I do believe that can be done through health and human services, the performing arts, higher education, K through 12, early child education, and the plethora of other agencies that are out there in our beautiful industry in the nonprofit world. We do provide solutions. We're all going to have to pivot and shift the manner in which we do that. And our communications right now is trying to position us as flexible, not straying from our wheelhouse, but flexible in the way we deliver solutions.
Excellent, Patrick. Thanks so much for that. I agree. Everybody on this call, everybody registered, the 450 plus folks were all part of this and all part of finding the solution, whether it's arts and culture or human services on the front lines or higher ed or what have you, education. It's all part of solving the crisis and the economic implications that are to come. So, we're gonna shift now to questions from all of you on the webinar, and we hope you can continue to ask questions and follow up and even comment if you have ideas on how for solutions during this crisis. So I'm gonna, John, hand it over to you to be our MC.
You bet. First of all, really great questions, and we'll certainly try to curate them to the best we can. This is being recorded, so hopefully you can back up and see things. But I want to first thank Lauren for finding the HBR article. Well done. I answered it. So if you go to the Q&A tab, and I hope everybody can see this, if you go to answered, there's the link. That will also include it when AFP and MPW push out the links to this recording. So back to questions. We've got about 16 of them, and we're going to be very democratic here. And starting with Kirk's question, which is basically, I'm going to summarize it this way. You can all read it, but it really strikes the heart of what everyone's doing. It doesn't matter what kind of nonprofit you're in, whether you're in social services, education, doesn't matter. Is this balance between the current need and being respectful of people. I'm gonna, before I pitch this, and Matt's giving me some power here, so I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna direct it to one of you guys, Kay, Matt, or Patrick. But I'll probably direct this answer to Kay only because she's done a lot of fundraising in much smaller crisis in a way. I think every fundraising has a kind of type of crisis, nothing to this magnitude, of course. But I think Kay could answer this question of how do you deal with a crisis while being respectful of where the donor's at. So Kay, I hope I don't need to unmute you, but you may need to unmute yourself if you could answer that.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I
Thank
got
you.
it. I got that power. Yeah. Thanks. And Matt, definitely, and Patrick and John, feel free to elaborate kind of on my initial thoughts. But Kirk, I think I know you're specific to a school, but I think as John pointed out, the heart of this is about that, striking that balance in tone and engagement. And I think it ultimately always comes down to the relationship and where you're at in the stewardship with that particular donor. Because it's about how you've developed it and cultivated it, and finding the sweet spot between the two to actually engage them authentically. I think that is something that has become clear at this time, and one of the things that we can leverage is our own authenticity in this moment, because people appreciate and respond to that. They're authentically showing up, engaged, and wanting to help, and they need that from us, and they deserve that from us. And to Patrick's point earlier, even if it's identifying, I don't know where I'll be 5 days from now, can you hold on while I figure it out? I think there is a lot to be said for being vulnerable and connecting in that space, and engaging them in that moment. Matt, Patrick?
Yeah, excellent. Okay, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, right, the school's not on the front lines, but the people you serve we all are on the front lines in a way. And I think they do deserve to hear from you. And that's the parents, that's the alumni parents, and even the alumni. And that, to hear from you and talk to them about what's going on, what's happening at the school, how everyone's being impacted. And if there are those things that you can raise money around, that are emergency funding or something like that, and if that exists, that's the opportunity to engage donors towards the solicitation if comfortable. So, if I think every organization again is on the front lines in a way, because you can provide a place for kind of people to heal and get better. So, Patrick, do you have any thoughts?
No, I concur. Well said.
I'll take the liberty of just saying one thing I shared with a client the other day. Don't make the decision for the donor. And we want to, and not out of bad intentions. We want to respect leadership. But one thing I've learned over, 100 years of fundraising, and it took me that long to get to this point maybe, is that, what you're going through in your head is not what someone else is going through in their head. And that can be, all across the spectrum. So I just leave with that. The next question is from Maggie, and I'm going to direct this one to Matt, because he and I hate to compliment him in front of everybody, so just Matt, close your ears, is really good at portfolio management. But this is kind of the nuts and bolts of good fundraising. And it's a really good question for Maggie, where she says, yeah, there's donors I know in my portfolio, I feel comfortable having it, but how do I deal with donors that I may not be so comfortable in my portfolio? So Matt, you want to start first, and Kaye, Patrick certainly chime in.
Yeah, that is a great question. And again, I think that's almost the balance between, if those donors are kind of in identification mode, to get technical, and instead of cultivation mode, those are the donors that you know well. But I think it also, there's a reason they're probably in the portfolio and they're connected to the organization. I'm going to make that assumption. And if they are, I think you take that thread of connection, and it's an opportunity to reach out and maybe even build that relationship. What an opportunity to reach out to somebody and just see how they're doing and thank them for all their past support to your organization, and update them on how your organization or institution is navigating this crisis. So I think it's a good touch point. It's worth it. I think people will respond well to that, whether you know them well or not. They hopefully, if they're in your portfolio, know the organization well. And it's, again, a good connection point.
Right. Yeah, I would say that I agree with Matt. Everyone's in your portfolio for a reason. And at this time right now, everybody is going through a certain degree of fear, anxiety, fear of the unknown, fear of the impact that it's directly having on them and others. And so many of our constituents, especially those that would live in our portfolios, are going to be, at least for a little while now, and maybe even in the long term, shielded somewhat from the full brunt of this, because of the good fortune that they've had in their lives. So what I was speaking with my Don Rocky, my director of corporate social responsibility, you know, we were laboring over how to approach some of those corporations who are, yeah, they're friends, but they're a little less known to us. We don't have a real tight relationship. And Don and I sort of made it this simple. When this storm passes and things are looking a little, you know, better, and we're all taking a deep breath and we talk about, we start thanking everyone who got us through it. The last thing we want to have happen is our friends to come to us and say, why didn't you ask me? You know, I was in pain at that moment too, and I wanted to help. Why wouldn't you have thought to approach me? So if you just even approach it from that mentality, you're checking in, our humanity comes first. How are you? Let me tell you how we're doing. Here's our response. And then just do what we're supposed to do, folks. Listen for those cues and see if we know they're going to be in some form of pain and anxiety. It could very well be that helping us out, one of the greatest ways to manage anxiety is to help another person. Even those who know us less than we know them, or feel like we know them, may find a certain degree of relief and joy in helping us through a hard time. And again, thinking long term now, when the sun does come back up and it's a brighter time, they're going to remember us. They're going to remember we turned to them for help and they were able to help us. The dollar value almost matters less than us giving them an opportunity to be a part of a solution and be part of helping out whatever it is that we are delivering to the community through our mission.
All right. Kaye, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's all excellent and spot on.
All right.
I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I see Jean's comment about meeting in Zoom. Is that meeting donors via Zoom? And Jean, you can answer that in a little bit. I don't know if I have that right. But go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. I haven't seen her comment yet.
Okay.
I'm following.
While John's getting the next, he's getting the next question, a member of my team came to me, Ben Fiskus, who is one of our leadership giving directors, and he came up with an idea of Zoom coffees. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Go Ben. Yeah, I like it. I love it.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Well, I've been participating in Zoom beers, so yeah, why not coffee?
Whatever.
Whatever floats your boat.
I think we got time for a few more questions, but I also want to leave, okay, Matt and Patrick, I want to give you guys a kind of a 1 minute close on some things, because I think if anybody leaves this, it's maybe just kind of an overall feel of what's going on. So just be ready for that in 5 minutes. But the next question, and I apologize, Leanna, if I'm butchering your name, it might be Lena, but I thought she made a really good point. You can read it in the Q&A. It is a good time to reach out to donors, and kind of what Patrick was saying and everything else. But I'd be curious, and maybe we can just start with Patrick this time. And I know we've been talking about this, but maybe just get a reinforcement of what she says is that there's a really good line she put in here is, you know, how can we help? People are actually asking that. And I don't think fundraisers are prepared for that. And it took me years. Post September 11th, I was shocked at how many people wanted to help. Post the Great Recession, 2008. But Patrick, do you mind kind of responding to Leanna's comment and her question?
And I'm sorry, John, would you just rephrase the question one more time?
Sure. It's basically, she was saying that, do you agree that this is a good time to reach out to donors? Do you have any language to guide that conversation?
Well, I think it's absolutely not only a good idea, I think it's an essential time to reach out to donors. I'm looking right in the mirror when I say this, literally at my Zoom reflection. Our donors are people first. They are individuals. And so just, fall back on our fundamental humanity. If nothing else, you're reaching out to a family member and saying, how are you? We as a development team and an executive team are coaching one another constantly. Remember, the first thing that you're doing when you pick up the phone is saying, how are you? And it should be sincere. I hope it's sincere. It certainly is coming from me. And then doing what we do in the normal course of development work. We are providing updates, and instead of all of our bona fides, and let me tell you about the latest and greatest thing that just happened. In this case, we're just saying, hey, let me tell you where we stand today in the COVID response. You're listening. if you've done nothing else, you've checked in with a family member and a friend and said, I just wanted to know that you were okay and to let you know we're okay. I'll look forward to talking with you again soon. In good development style, we're just listening for those cues and those triggers to say, does this person on the other side of the phone from me or the other side of this Zoom call, are they going to lean in? And we've seen on our team a lot of leaning in. Probably the most common thing that we are having offered to us and that we are proactively asking is, for the next 90 days, can you unrestrict your giving? Can you allow us to respond in real time to crises as they come up and the ones that we know are coming? And that has been met very favorably. And the beauty of that long-term, folks, is that it is an amazing endorsement of their belief in our mission. Yes, we know, and we all get frustrated with donors grabbing our tail and wagging our dog and saying, can you create a new program that I just came up with? In this case, bring them back to fundamentals. There's a reason we exist. There's a reason we have the public trust. Bring them back to that space. That will have, I know it, that's going to have long-term benefit. It did between 2008 and 2008 and 10. When we brought people back to those fundamentals, I believe it'll do so during this crisis as well.
I'd like to just, I think, add a little bit to that one. There was a time in one of the schools that I was leading when we were experiencing some pretty significant hardship, especially related to the physical environment that we lived in. And I was surprised to Leanna's identification, and what I've heard consistently over the past few days too, is donors showing up and saying, how can we help? Because they know you're in the middle of a situation. And I think that was a moment, and it's been a moment Matt even has coached me through at times, is leaning into it and also saying, well, how do you see yourself helping as well? Because perhaps there's a way that a donor wants to show up and has an idea, or they just have the beginning of an idea of how they can fit in, and you can help cultivate and develop that relationship so they have even more ownership and partnership with you through their giving and the growth of their the growth of their engagement with your organization. Because I saw that specific, those specific moments then grow into very long-term, sustained giving over time, because there was the willingness to say, awesome, you want to give? I'm not in my brain, I'm not totally sure how I see that happening, but then listening and leaning in, as Patrick said, to how they see themselves showing up, and that being cultivated into something bigger than it starts off.
Matt, you have any other parties?
No, both beautifully said. So
Great.
Nothing to add.
I'm gonna close this up with, I'm gonna take the liberty of answering David's question here. David Wolf's question about what's the expectation, because I've been doing a lot of reading, but also just kind of a lot of historical analysis. We're gonna see a 20%, 30% pullback, all that. Well, all bets are off. And Matt and I were talking to a friend yesterday who's involved in the market, and it's very similar to the stock market, not just in giving, but in terms of the old qualifier of previous returns are not necessarily symptomatic or a snapshot of what's going to happen. But I would say, to answer David's question, is that historically, every time there's been a drop, recessions and so forth, the market and the charitable giving really follow each other. So you don't see a lot of markets you don't see charitable giving just fall off the cliff while the markets stay strong or even down a little. So I would say, that gives me comfort in the sense that, people are charitable in good times, and, consequently, you don't, when things are going really well, you don't see philanthropy just blow up either. So I would just part with that. To make sure that we respect everybody's time and everything, let's just jump into that 1 minute kind of observation from everybody here. And I will continue to hoard the mic with my initial thought, and then Patrick, Kay, and then finish with Matt. My thinking about it is this, and it is just my thought. Having worked on fundraising for a lot of years, it reminds me a lot of working with families that have suffered loss, memorial scholarships, just anything that people are suffering. And it always felt awkward to me to reach out to them at times, but gradually over time I realized it wasn't awkward. It was actually, and there's a lot of people like that have this tendency, myself included, when I feel there's a difficult situation or just emotionally just sad, I want to take action. It's just my nature. And when you help people in a respectful way, you listen to them. But if they're transmitting and they're letting you know in one form or fashion that they want to be part of the solution and they're ready, then help them. And what you'll find is you'll be astounded. And this wasn't just for individuals, but post 2008, people will appreciate the fact that you included them early on. And when they're ready to give and it's the appropriate time, that's going to be such a strong relationship. So that's just my initial thoughts. Patrick?
Yeah, thanks, John. I would say I learned this from my director of philanthropy, Jenna Feedy. We were having a strategy conversation before the COVID-19 pandemic blew up, and we were kind of saying, what do we wish for our organization? And one of her wishes was that we could move ourselves into a space where we stop thinking from a position of scarcity. Every nonprofit organization does it. We all are sort of apologetic about spending money and about asking for money. We think because we're nonprofit, we have to, come from a position of scarcity. And I think in this time of crisis, we should do that, meaning every one of us, our organizations, were given the public trust for a reason. We provide a vital resource to our community, and don't be apologetic about it. Don't be apologetic about representing any facet of the nonprofit industry. You and your organization, we all are a vital part of a community fabric. So ask yourselves, as I am asking myself and my organization, how can I help? How can I ask others to help me support through our organization that piece of that thread or those threads in our fabric? I'll give you just one of our examples is this. 90% of Boys and Girls Club members, so 10,000 members, 90% of them live at or below poverty. So their parents and the adults in their families largely represent the service industry in our community. Large corporate employers and governments rely on service employees every single day. So what we are saying as an out-of-school time provider is help us continue to help the service industry upon which your employees and our community is reliant. And that's just one of many examples. We all can come up with that. So don't always think I'm coming from you at you with a position of scarcity. Help me, help us. It's, may I ask you to help our organization continue to play a vital role in our community, and acknowledge we're all going to be tightening our belts, of course, but we all still have a vital role to play in the community. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like my biggest takeaway right now and thing to hold on to is we're not in a vacuum. You're not in a vacuum. It may feel like it at times, but you're not and we're not. So remember that. Engage, connect, reach out, listen. I think that's a through line that continues to come out. Listen to yourself, listen to each other, listen to your funders, listen to your constituents. But don't be afraid to be and stay connected, and we move through this together.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, in this time of social distancing, people are hungry for connection. And I think as fundraisers, we're in this unique position to really help and influence that. And that, one, we can keep people connected and update them. I mean, they're involved in these organizations. It's your organization. It's a big part of their life. It's something that they probably love, and they probably love being involved in. And it's very important to them. So your connection alone, giving them an update of what's going on, how it's helping, what's taking place, how the population being served is being connected, to just let them know that. And then also the opportunity to give. I mean, giving is a wonderful thing. And we all know that giving makes you feel good. And what a great opportunity for those that can give, to give them that opportunity to make an impact. Especially during this time when we need it so much. I think you've heard it a lot. Don't sit back, engage, connect, be part of these people's lives, I think you'll help them lead a bigger and better life in the long term. And I think that's one of those great things that we have as fundraisers and those connections that we can make in people's lives. The other thing, there's a lot of questions about corporations. I just want to cover this real quick. There's Maggie made a comment about small businesses. I completely agree. I would leave those alone. They're struggling right now. It's very tough. But there are companies that still have a lot of money. I mean, I think banks have a lot of money on the sidelines. There are industries that are making a lot of money. I think it's a great opportunity for those companies to give back. And if you can target that right industry or corporate set and provide that opportunity for them to for that company to make a difference, I think they would be all over it and want to be part of it. And I'd also say, I don't know, I'm going to throw this out to John, Patrick, and Kay. If there's any more questions, that we can spend a little more time or we can go over a little bit here. And then on the other side, go ahead.
Yeah, Pat or Matt, I want to be, again, respectful of time. We don't have too much, but I'll just be 30 seconds here. Kind of similar to what you said about businesses, foundations, absolutely. And I think Kay or Patrick, you're talking about this. Reach out to the ones you have relationships with, and if there's restrictions or reporting, they're going to ease up on those because they know you might be in triage. We're just trying to get kids in the class or kids that we're in a classroom up and running. The second thing is the foundations, I think particularly around Denver, but Colorado and possibly even nationwide, all of them are getting the signal, open up their checkbooks. I just had a client the other day or last week, we said, reach out to them ASAP. And they wired the money, $40,000, and said more to come instantly. And part of it is because the organization gave that sense of urgency. So that's another thing too. Give a sense of urgency. Even if you're not on the front line, we're going to have, so don't be bashful about that. Foundations, I think the bigger ones certainly get it.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. And so just moving on, we didn't get to everybody's questions. We are going to continue this. We're going to have a weekly session. And in that, we will, here's the lineup. So next Friday, Maggie McHenry with Florence Crittenden. And then we'll be talking to Zim Consultant and Jen Darling with Children's Hospital on April 17th. And Melissa Baldwin will also be joining us at a future date. So over the next several weeks, we want to do this weekly. We're going to take an hour during lunch on Friday and cover some certain topics. So we hope you'll join. We hope you'll continue to be part of this. And I think, when we look at these sessions, it's really about all of us coming together, giving ideas and really thinking through how do we fundraise? How do we move our organizations forward in this real time of crisis? As a lot of us just said, I think we're just in the beginning of this. There's some economic fallout that will happen. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we hope you'll join us for future sessions. You can connect with us on MPW Strategies. Go to our site and use the contact page, or on LinkedIn. You can connect with us as well. I want to also say, if you're not a member of AFP, I hope you'll join. They're the gracious host of this session. And in that, I'm going to turn it over to Janie to talk about what's coming up at AFP. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you for your questions. They're terrific. Thank you for your comments. They're awesome. Let's keep them going. Let's keep this conversation going. Please join us every Friday at 12. And Janie, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, I wish we could all give you a big applause, but we can't. But I know everyone probably enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you all for sharing your expertise and your insight with us. I think having kind of a steady knowledge and leadership role at this point is really helpful for all of us. So thank you for being that for us today. And then a reminder to everyone that we will have a coffee chat on April 9th. With Tanya Moat talking about overcoming the fear of fundraising. And then finally, I just want to send a thank you. You can't see them, but the AFP Education Committee facilitates all of our education opportunities. And they got together during this crisis and said, what do our members need? And so a huge kudos to them for having the insight to put this together and really coordinate everything. So thanks to Danae and her team for making that happen. And thanks to you all. And I guess, John, you know how we wrap this up?
Hopefully see you next
I
week.
do.
And
Yeah, I do. We all wave. Everybody wave. Or hold up your favorite cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Tito the raccoon. Find him on YouTube. That's a shout out to all my kids. And thank you for joining us. And not to make light of things, but at least we try to see the light in things. So take care.
Take care.